Hello, good people, and welcome to Sex, Drugs, and Everything Else. I'm your host, Alex Trust. Good to see you again, or hear you. I guess I'm not doing either, but I guess it's good to be heard. How about that? Sound good? Anyway, the show's simple. We do usually 3 segments. 2 of them are topical. The last one is new artists that I find, musicians, writers, poets, whatnot. But like I kind of changed it up in the second episode, I'm going to change it up again this episode. I am going to talk about what I promised to talk about, which is drugs. And it is such a big subject that it is going to take up most of the episode. In fact, it could take up 10 episodes. But we are just going to take up about 22 minutes of your time talking about drugs. Now, I want to be very clear. I am not an expert on drugs. I am not a doctor. I'm not even a drug counselor. I'm just a guy with some thoughts on the subject and someone that has, well, a long history with this subject, both inherited and chosen. A lot of people in my family have addictions. I've struggled with addiction. But just because we're talking about drugs doesn't mean that we're going to talk about addiction. We will touch on it, but it's not all about addiction. Because quite frankly, I think drugs have some advantages. They're a tool, just like everything else in life. So that's what we're going to do. Then at the end, we're going to read a poem called Quantum Consciousness by a very interesting man that I met. Apparently he lives in the Netherlands, I want to say. His name is Alexander Alexandrou. At least that's his Facebook handle. And his poem is fantastic. So I'm going to read that to you at the end. I might find a piece of music to throw in there too, but if I can't find something good, I'm not going to just put on something I don't like, because I want you to like it. So, you ready? Let's get this thing started. Here we go. So, the first thing we're going to start with is kind of what I said before. Drugs are a tool, like everything else in life. Basically, what we're talking about is illegal substances that can alter the brain chemistry to one degree or another. That includes heroin, cocaine, hallucinogens, amphetamines, all of it. So once you start looking at it as a tool, you quickly realize that they're neither good nor evil. I'm tired of people saying that, this heroin epidemic is such a disease and it's ruining people's lives and killing so many people. And, well, that may or may not be true. There are a lot more overdoses nowadays because opiates have become so prevalent in our society, mostly because of the Oxycontin crisis and Purdue Pharma, but we're not going to get into all that. But I think they're taking the wrong attitude about it. I think we need a paradigm shift in realizing what addiction is and what drugs are and what they can do for us, as well as how they harm us. Because I'll tell you, I have had some of the best times in my life on drugs. I have had some of the best ideas. I've written some of my best stuff when I've been high. Now, I'm not saying I had to be high to do these things or to feel that way. But, well, no, I guess I actually am saying that. A comedian, Bill Hicks, once said, if you're totally against drugs, take all your records, all your movies, all your books, and just throw them in a fire, or something along those lines, he said, because all those artists that you love so much, all those authors, all those movie stars, real fucking high on drugs. And that's what he said. Now, I agree, not all artists or authors or movie stars are on drugs, but a lot of them were, especially musicians and authors. I mean, Hemingway was a drunk for sure. Hunter S. Thompson was a famous drug addict who was also a famous journalist and author. If you don't know who he is, check him out. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, baby. It's awesome. But anyway, so once you realize that drugs are just a tool, just like anything else, yes, of course they can be abused, but they can also be used to expand consciousness. They can be used to turn down the volume on life, to make things a little more bearable so people that do have talent in writing and music and other mediums, it turns down the volume on life, and you can actually hear yourself think for a change and actually get some stuff done. Now, a common misconception is that drugs will just automatically expand your consciousness and making you more creative and better at what you're doing. This is not true. It is a tool. If you don't have the talent to begin with, no amount of drugs is going to make you good at something. You have to have the natural talent, and you have to have had worked on it and become proficient at it before drugs can actually help you. But as far as them hurting society and people as a whole, it can happen, most definitely, when they're misused, when you become addicted. And I define addiction basically as any chemical that you take or behavior that you enact, I guess, any behavior that you follow, like sex or gambling or even eating, that you have to have just to feel normal. At first, it makes you feel better than you usually do, but once you're addicted, they basically are being taken, or the actions being taken, just to feel normal. And that's when you know you're addicted. There's also physical addiction, like with heroin, which is a extremely slippery slope. I was addicted to Oxycontin for years, for absolute years. I was prescribed it by my doctor. I became physically addicted within 2 months, and eventually, once the man started cracking down on Oxycontin use, my doctor cut me off, and I went to the street and started buying it there. Now, does that make me a bad person? I don't think so. I made a lot of mistakes, and I caused my family a lot of heartache, but I am making up for that now, and it's nothing they haven't forgiven me for. So, no matter what you've done, no matter who you are, if you want to change, you can. Does this mean you have to quit drugs forever? Well, I've found that doesn't have to be the case. However, once again, I'm not an expert, so I don't want you to take this particular advice. I myself still dabble, but I'm extremely cautious when I do it, and it's rare and far in between. I do still drink, but what are you going to do? You got to have some vices. Never trust a man without at least a couple vices, and mine are cigarettes and alcohol at this point. But what you should remember, what you should take from this, is if you do have an addiction, you're not a bad person. You're not diseased. You're just confused. That's it. You've let the drug get out of hand. You've let the drug take control. You're not using the drug anymore. The drug is using you. That's why they call it having a monkey on your back. Because who wants a furry little smelly beast on their back? And that's what addiction can be. So, take it with a grain of salt, but I do know what I'm talking about for the most part, because I've lived it, and I've watched other people live it, and I've seen what's worked and what hasn't. I've seen people that have gone to dozens of rehabs and never gotten clean. I've also seen people that have gone to one rehab or just a meeting like NA or CA or AA, and they have an epiphany and they stop right then. A lot of people in between, kind of like myself, they've found that drugs are simply a tool. Neither good nor bad. It's just how you use them. So, I don't know. What do you think? I'd like to have some dialogue on this. So if anyone has any ideas or thoughts, or they think I mishandled this, or anything at all, I don't care what it is, as long as it's respectful and you don't curse too much. Not more than necessary anyway. You can get a hold of me at sex, drugs, and everything else at gmail.com, and I will try and get back to you as soon as I see it. I also believe that on Anchor, you can message me. So I'm not sure what platform you're using because I'm on Apple iPod or podcasts. I'm on Spotify. I'm on a bunch of different platforms. Everything the website that I'm doing this on hooked me up with. So it seems like I'm on most of the major platforms. But I believe there's a way you can message me. I'm not sure. I'm not great with tech. But anyway, I'd love to hear from you. So, I don't know. What do you think? Alright, well, that's going to do it for this segment. We've talked about drugs like I promised, and now we're going to get on to that poetry. Alright. Okay, I realized after I recorded that I really only did about 9 minutes. So I only did about half of what I thought I was going to about drugs. So this might be a little unprofessional and it might seem a little amateur hour, but I'm just going to keep talking about drugs. We are going to hit upon addiction a little bit more, and we're going to talk about Purdue Pharma and how they caused this opioid crisis. And then I'm going to bring it back up and talk about my favorite drugs right at the end. How about that? Alright, no one can say that I haven't done my due diligence on this, and I am warning you, drugs can be dangerous. They can kill you. If you don't use them properly, they probably will kill you, especially if you're doing something dangerous like opiates or cocaine or methamphetamine. Methamphetamine is a little out of my wheelhouse. It's not something I've ever tried, but it does seem like it's one of the more dangerous drugs. Now, as far as the opioid crisis in this country, it was started in the 90s by Purdue Pharma when they invented OxyContin. OxyContin was advertised as being less addictive and better for pain, better for long-term pain management, for end-of-life type of stuff, and for, ongoing illnesses, chronic illnesses, and, after surgery, things like that. But it was an absolute fabrication. It was just as addictive as any other opiate that had been invented by then, and ended up being more addictive. So what happened was, people started getting a hold of this stuff. The doctors were prescribing it like candy. And then they started getting it on the street too when they got cut off by their doctors or whatever ends up happening. So all these people, this generation of people, got hooked on OxyContin. Then all of a sudden, eating them isn't good enough, so maybe you crush them up and snort them. Then that's not good enough, so maybe you crush them up and you put them in a spoon and you suck it up with a needle and then you shoot it in your arm. And that is one of the best highs you'll ever get. Pharmaceutical grade, baby. Better than morphine, better than heroin, really. But, comparable, anyway. So people started doing that, and then the DEA gets wise to what's going on, but they can't figure out who the hell to bust because it's not your traditional drug dealer setup. You've got little old ladies on Medicare getting this stuff prescribed to them and then selling it just so they can pay for their life, so they can, have an apartment and get their other medicine like heart medicine and insulin and stuff they really need to survive. So they'd sell it on the street. They would sell it to their, cousins or their nephews or whoever, and then they would become more the traditional drug dealer, not on the corner per se, but the DEA couldn't figure it out for the longest time. They didn't have anyone to bust because the supplier was Purdue Pharma and the doctors, and the distributors were little old ladies and people with chronic illnesses. So it was just ridiculous. Now, what happened was eventually they put a gelling agent into the Oxycontin pills, or at least most of them. What this gelling agent did was make it impossible to snort the pills or to shoot the pills. So then the next stage, of course, was the reemergence of heroin on the street, as well as fentanyl. Fentanyl was really originally used to cut the heroin, but then it just ended up replacing the heroin. Most of the things that you would see on the news these days, or if you know someone that does it, what they're getting is probably mostly fentanyl. But heroin was first, and then the fentanyl, and man, it just took off. And now we've got this opioid crisis. Well, opiate crisis. Opioid, opiate. Opiates are the natural ones that come from the poppy. Opioids are the ones that are manufactured, man-made. So that's how Purdue Pharma completely fucked us over and got a whole generation of people hooked on something that they never saw coming because it was prescribed by their very trustworthy family physicians and doctors. So yeah, thanks Purdue Pharma. But they're paying now, hopefully. They'll probably never really pay. They're a really rich family and, they're probably untouchable. But what are you going to do? So, the other thing I'd like to talk about is, some of the good experiences I've had on drugs. I'll tell you, especially with some of the hallucinogens, I really did feel like I had an epiphany. Now, this happened several times, but there were some bad trips too, where I didn't enjoy it as much, especially with psilocybin, shrooms. But mostly, I had good experiences with it. Now, did it change my life for the better at the time? Not necessarily. I think I learned a lot, and it was wisdom that I've never forgotten. But did it make me a better person? Did it make me more productive? No, absolutely not. Like I said, I was addicted to OxyContin for years. And I'll tell you what, you see junkies on TV, and they're always nodding out, and they're useless, and they suck. That wasn't the case. I've found a lot of the guys I worked with when I was a meat cutter, took OxyContin and oxycodone and Vicodin and all that. And we were a hell of a lot more productive when we had the pills in us, when we weren't hurting as bad, walking on concrete floors and having the same repetitive motion over and over and over, cutting meat. It's a hard job, disgusting job. Paid very well, though. So, yeah, drugs aren't necessarily always bad. And you think about palliative care, end-of-life care, stuff like that. When people really need drugs, they really need drugs. So, what do you think? Then again, There's drugs like marijuana, which have almost no harmful side effects. Is it great to smoke it for your lungs? Not really, but you can vape it. You can also eat it. It's a lot more potent when you eat it, actually, because of the way your liver processes it, but I'm not going to go into that. So, I have to say, it's 50-50. It's just a tool. And if you misuse it, yes, it's going to fuck you up. But if you use it properly and you're careful, I think it can have great advantages and benefits for people just singular and society as a whole. Because I'll tell you what, if people smoked more marijuana, I think we'd be a lot nicer to each other. I'm always nice when I'm smoking. I don't even consider it a drug, really. It's more of a medicine, but I'm not going to start splitting hairs. But yeah, if we could just be kinder to each other, I guarantee we could change the world in a short amount of time if we were just honestly kinder to each other. The rest of the problems would fall in line behind that. If we stop being so selfish, if we stop being greedy, if we became more giving, we could really change the world just by doing something that simple. Maybe it seems naive, but that's something I've learned from drugs, on drugs. I'm not going to tell you that you should do drugs. That's not what I'm saying. So I hope no one misquotes me. But if you do, be cautious, be knowledgeable, know what you're doing before you do it. Just don't take some shit someone hands you. That's why everything should be legal, quite frankly. Every single drug should be legal. We'd balance the budget in a year, the federal budget, if you did it across the board. We could vape all the major drugs, so there wouldn't be the risk of overdose and shit like that. People would be clued in to what they were doing, how much of it they should do. It would come with fucking instructions, just like every other legal medicine does. So why not? It would cut down on crime. It would cut our police budget in half. It would cut our prison problem in half. So, I guess that's it. I guess I'm done talking about it now. I've hit all the major points I wanted to. And once again, I hope you'll respond and make this a dialogue. But I'm not going to harp on it again. So, let's get to this poem I promised. Quantum consciousness. When darkness falls and shadows grow tall and live, mind awakes from life simmed by the matrix hive. While body material slips in stasis of bare existence, spirit rises from the realm of enforced subsistence. It flexes the silver cord and spreads its bright golden wings to make sure it's rid of fleshy bonds and iron rings. Free to roam straight and true, renovant in glory and shine, in the infinite eternity of multiverse living vine. Matter left behind and consciousness focused on the task, spirit wills its astral existence to levitate over the husk, turn outward and fly in space-time at speed of thought, from star to star to quantum freedom in multiverse of naught, where quarks and leptons move in sync with panpsychic spark, in everlasting oscillation between light essence and matter dark, where sky is not the limit and universe not a system closed, but an eternal energy wave of tachyons and gravitons disclosed. Eventless is the passage from black to white holes, timeless the voyage through wondrous wormholes, painless is matter reconstruction for consciousness return, to the earthly existence all souls long for and yearn. The brilliance of ethereal darkness rapidly subsides as silver cord retracts into the body consciousness resides. Superego ascendant will assert itself once more in timeless presence the Matrix makes for humans to explore. Once again, that was a poem by Alexander Alexandrov, a man that I met on Facebook, and I'm glad I did. He has become a fast friend and kind of a mentor, although I don't think he likes to think of himself that way. He's a very wise guy, one of the best people I've ever met, especially on fucking Facebook. Alright, so that's going to do it for this episode, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I wasn't too weird or off-putting for you. But if I was, well, like I said in the first episode, keep it to yourself. Nah, just kidding. Once again, this is a safe space. So, all I have left to say is, may kindness and gratitude brighten all your days. Peace.